Hey everyone, welcome back to Observe. Today we're going to be starting another segment, another new one as a matter of fact, called Body Language 101. There will be some review for those of you who have been around for a little bit here on the channel, but once again, I'm designing this entire series to be a reference material that is able to be like binged, so to speak. You just watch one after another of these videos in order to be able to really begin studying nonverbal communication. But today's video specifically is going to be centered around the nonverbal communication of, at the top of the body, the forehead. Let's go ahead and begin. Now, according to research done at the University of Glasgow, the previous concept that the human emotion variant is basically 6 broad emotions might be incorrect. You see, originally they said that there was anger, sadness, happiness, surprise, disgust, and fear. However, with this new research that has come out, they have narrowed that down to 4, and these are anger, happiness, sadness, and fear. So they took out disgust and surprise because they're so similar to fear and anger. Now, there are definitely very different manifestations of, for instance, fear and surprise or disgust and anger, but non-verbally speaking, they are extremely similar. So with that kind of base ground laid out, I'm going to go ahead and continue the video and the rest of these videos in relation to those 4 main ones of anger, fear, happiness, and sadness. Anyways, though, something that you need to keep in mind during this video is that the forehead in and of itself isn't a just broad wealth of information and nonverbal tells unless you include the features around it. So for instance, the eyebrows or the eyes. However, we're still going to give it our best shot because it's at the top of the head and there are still some things that you can keep in mind while viewing a person's forehead. So on to part number 1, and that is happiness. Now, happiness, the emotion of happiness manifests itself in a couple different ways. For extreme, over-the-top, exuberant happiness, what you would end up seeing in the forehead regions would be some crinkling. Now, this is obviously actually done by the eyebrows, but the manifestation of it is seen in the forehead when the eyebrows raise. Now, in the actual just everyday average happiness, not too much actually happens. You're not going to see like a micro expression of happiness because it's not manifested best through the forehead or the eyebrows. If you're looking only there, you will see it elsewhere in the body, and more specifically the face, but not in the forehead. During a micro expression of happiness, there's not going to be a whole ton of movement up there for you. If you see somebody raise their eyes slightly during something as a micro expression, that means more likely that it's surprise, not happiness. Now, before you scoff at that, that's still something to remember, and it's still something to hold on to as information that you now know. So you're not going to misread somebody. You're going to be able to look at that and be like, all right, so I saw that eyebrow flash. Likely not happiness, probably something else. However, if you do suspect someone of being happy and trying to conceal it, and you're looking at their eyebrows, if they continually are moving, that means that something else is going through their head. It's not just pure happiness. So take that or leave it for what you desire. On to the next emotion. And that one's going to be fear. And the reason that I'm covering fear next after happiness instead of going through the list as I did before is because they have very similar expressions to each other. In fact, they are so similar that some could even argue that they are the same in their physical manifestations. Now, if this sounds really confusing to you, I suppose this would be an excellent time for me to point out the necessity, like the absolute necessity of observing the entire human body and face in context with each other while observing nonverbal communication. Because if you don't say you're focusing on just one point, you can mistake surprise for happiness, or vice versa. And these are not too big a deal. It's not too big to see if somebody's like surprised or afraid, but it is pretty bad if you get something like boredom and anger mixed up, then it starts getting a little bit more hairy. Anyways, let's continue on. To be fully honest, the difference between the two emotions of happiness and fear aren't going to lie in the eyebrows. Where it does lie, however, in relation to the forehead is in the micro expression. You see, like I said earlier, there's not a micro expression of happiness in relation to the forehead. However, there is for fear. Whenever you see somebody flash a quick eyebrow raise, that is a micro expression of fear. That specific micro expression isn't exclusive to fear, but it is a fear micro expression. I hope that makes sense to you. So keep your eye out for that micro expression. If you see somebody flash their eyebrows up or see their forehead wrinkle ever so slightly, which obviously means that the eyebrows have to be going up, then they might be worried or surprised or afraid of something, anything that's in that fear subgenre. So keep your eye out for more tells that might be able to back up your claims. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the next one, the third one on the list, and that is going to be sadness. During sadness, the forehead has a very specific movement that is once again driven by the eyebrows. And that's this slight pulling together of the eyebrows, which causes a little bit of a drawing together of the forehead right towards the middle of the forehead above the eyebrows. Now, during extreme sadness, this general expression will be present. However, there may be more movement in there as the person processes such extreme emotion. However, the expression is usually fairly steady. During the micro expression version of this, where they're trying to mask their sadness, this will still be present, but it will be very, very slight and very, very brief. In fact, the rule of thumb is that a micro expression takes less than a second on average, sometimes even less than a half or a quarter of a second. So you have to keep your eyes peeled for this very slight movement of the pulling together of the eyebrows, which causes the motion to happen right here on the forehead. So keep that in mind, and you'll be able to see a little bit more. Once again, observing context, don't always stick to this, but it's a fairly solid one to work with. On to the next and last one on this list is going to be anger. Now, the reason that I did anger after sadness is once again because they're very, very similar in their manifestation. Not as similar as fear and happiness, but they are very, very similar. Now, during anger, the eyebrows will pull together harshly, not upwards and together, just straight together. And during that, it will cause a wrinkling, a distinct wrinkling right here, and possibly a little bit more up in this area here. Now, for anger, people who are feeling rage will have very, very many expressions and gestures that will back this up. But in their forehead, you will see this consistent tension that I just mentioned. And the same goes for a micro expression that is also masking anger. It won't be as strong, obviously, and it will be very, very brief, but it will still exist in that tensing and drawing together of the brow and forehead. So those are the things that you need to keep your eye out during anger. But that brings an end to this video. Now, something that you do need to keep in mind is that these aren't the only micro and macro expressions of the forehead. However, these are the ones that you're going to run into most, and there's always going to be variance depending on the emotion, because somebody who is happy can also feel sadness at the same time. Say they see a long lost friend and they remember in that point of joy of seeing their long-lost friend all the time that they missed together. That would be a happiness and sadness at the same time, which obviously it gets really, really complicated to read non-verbally speaking, but these videos are going to hopefully be able to line out and explain to you in a very sequential fashion how this would all work and manifest itself. I've said manifest probably like 85 times this video. Sorry about that. But I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that this one was informative for you, even though there's not a lot to tell about the forehead during micro and macro expressions and emotions, but I hope it was useful. If you liked this style of video, go ahead and leave a like, hit subscribe, ding the bell, do all those things. If you want to support me in a very, very meaningful and beneficial way for me, hop over to my Patreon and support me over there. There's a few things that are of benefit to the patrons that are over there already. But without further ado, that's all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.